Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." It was Thanksgiving, and the cousins were excited. Cousins are very excitable people. They tend to get excited about all sorts of things, so we shouldn't be surprised that the cousins were excited, but they were excited for a specific reason. You see, they were remembering the tragedy of last year. Last year, for Thanksgiving, they went to their grandparents' house, and while it's certainly always nice to go to your grandparents' house, grandparents did not have a good house for hosting Thanksgiving. They had this formal sitting area where children were to be seen and not heard. They had these glass tables with bowls of fake fruit, and the children didn't understand why those were there and certainly couldn't eat them. And the worst part was the TV. You see, this was a mixed family. It was half Detroit fans, half Dallas fans. And as anybody who watches football on Thanksgiving knows, the early game has the Lions playing, the late game has the Cowboys playing, although I think now they're up to like 4 or 5 games, I don't even know. But this is a family that really was excited to watch their football games, but Grandma and Grandpa did not have a good TV for that. Now, sure, it was a state-of-the-art color television when they first got it back in 1978, but it was not good anymore. It wasn't big enough. So the cousins were excited this year because they were going to Uncle Bill's house. Uncle Bill had a big house. Uncle Bill had a good job. And more importantly, Uncle Bill had a good TV. He was the favorite uncle. The cousins hadn't seen him in over a year. He didn't make it to Thanksgiving last year, and he didn't make it to Christmas either, but now they were going to see him. It was Thanksgiving 2006, and Uncle Bill had a 42-inch plasma TV, and that was just about the best thing that anybody could get at that point. The cousins were excited, and they wanted to know, "Uncle Bill, how did you get this TV? We saw the lines at Black Friday. We saw all the people who were waiting. We think we want to get a TV like that." And he said, "No, you can't get a TV like this. You don't know what this cost me." Well, they saw the ad in the paper, so they knew what the TV cost. And he said, "No, you don't understand. You don't know what this TV cost me. I left work on a Wednesday. I didn't go to Thanksgiving with the rest of the family. I waited in line for almost 24 hours in the cold so I could be first in line to buy this TV. That's what this TV cost me. It cost me 1 year. It cost me a Thanksgiving. I didn't get to see the rest of my family, and I'm happy to see you now, but that's what the TV cost me. I just want you to understand that." The cousins were just children, so they didn't really understand, and they said, the Nintendo Wii just came out, and in fact it did. And I checked my facts, so don't you challenge me on this. The Nintendo Wii came out 4 days before Thanksgiving in 2006, and the kids were excited about it. And he said, "No, you don't understand. If you want that Wii, you would have to be waiting outside yesterday to get it. That is the cost if you want it. If you want something bad enough, it's not just going to cost your money, it's going to cost your time too. You're going to have to give up family time if you want some of those deals on Black Friday. Although now you can just buy things on the internet, I guess. So it's not the same. There's no suffering involved. But there is suffering in what Jesus is talking about here. He's talking about the cost. And he's not just talking about money, he's talking about time and energy and everything else involved in being a disciple. Jesus is talking to people that we assume are believers. They were following him. And if you look at these sections from Luke, here we are in Luke 14, but if you look at the sections right around it, you'll see that Jesus has been challenging people a lot with his statements. And he knows exactly what to tell each group of people. Jesus had been eating with Pharisees, and he was telling them about the kingdom of heaven. He was comparing it to a banquet that everyone was invited to. And the Pharisees said, well, it'd be good to be invited to the banquet. And Jesus told them this story, and the point of the story was, You have been invited, and you refuse the invitation, and you are not going to be in heaven. But these Gentiles will be. It's not what the Pharisees wanted to hear, but this is a period of time when Jesus was challenging people to get them to understand something important. In the section right after this one, Jesus was there, and the Pharisees were there again, but this time they were other people. They were tax collectors. They were sinners. And the Pharisees said about Jesus, this man, he welcomes sinners. He eats with sinners. He thinks sinners are good. And Jesus then told the three famous stories about the lost sheep and the lost coin and the lost son, basically saying, I value these people, even if you don't. So right here we have Jesus talking to people that I assume are believers, and he challenges them, saying, I hope that when you're following me, you recognize what this is going to cost you. That you're not just here for a day, you took a day off of work, you're following Jesus, you want to see him heal some people, you want to see a miracle, you want to see something cool, but you're not going to stick around. Some commentators say about these crowds they were flighty people. They didn't think about what was going on. They were just there to have some fun. And I think that's unfair. I'm assuming a lot of these people were the same people that went to see John the Baptist out in the wilderness, the same people that were baptized, the same people that repented of their sins. And to those people, to these people who are following Jesus, this large crowd, Jesus just stops as he's walking and he turns around and he says something that's hard for them to hear. And he doesn't even explain it. He just trusts that they'll understand what he's saying. Maybe a similar group to the people who are here today. People who have been following Jesus. People who have been baptized. People who have repented of their sins. People who showed up here on a Sunday morning in the rain. You didn't have to do that. But you did. You're following Jesus. You understand the forgiveness of sins. You're here because Jesus took your sins away. He has forgiven you. He's promised you heaven. All of those wonderful things, and you're happy, and you sing praises to him. But now Jesus turns around, and he stops you in your tracks, and he's got something very important for you to hear and to think about. And he starts right out saying something that we don't want to hear. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, he can't be my disciple. Kids in the back, if you don't hate your father and mother, you can't be Jesus' disciple. For those of you who love your parents, who respect your parents, who think of their memory fondly, if you don't hate your father and mother, you can't be Jesus' disciple. And he doesn't even explain it. I'm going to explain it a little bit because I think that's only fair. I'm not Jesus. But he didn't explain it. He just put it right out there and trusted that they would understand the point that he was making. He doesn't want you to hate your parents, but you can't use love when you're talking about your parents in the same way when you're talking about Jesus. You can't say, I love Jesus, but I also love my parents. And when Jesus speaks and when my parents speak, I'm not exactly sure who to value more. I'm not sure who to listen to because I love both of them. Jesus says, no, if you're going to love me, the love for me must be so much greater that compared to the way that you think about your parents, you would say, I hate them. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his wife and children, you got to hate your family too, your immediate family. That woman that you promised to love in sickness and in health and all that other stuff that they say, till death do you part, you got to hate that woman. And not in the cutesy way that comedians say, oh, I hate my wife. No. Jesus is being serious here. You've got to hate your children. Not when they wake you up when you're asleep. You've got to hate them if they would tell you to do anything that I would tell you not to do. If your wife or your children would lead you into sin, you have to say about them, I hate them, compared to my love for Jesus. And in case there's anybody else missing, yeah, your brothers and sisters, and your own life too. You've got to hate your own life. You've got to be willing to die rather than to deny Jesus. And if your brother or sister would tell you to do something that was wrong, you wouldn't listen to him because of how much love you have for me. I explained that a lot more than Jesus did. He just put it right out there. He wanted the crowds to understand, if you're going to follow me, you can't just follow me for one day. You can't just follow me because it's convenient. You can't just follow me because this is what your parents did, and so now you're doing it too. You can't just do it on one Sunday a month or 2 Sundays a month, or even just on Sunday. This has to be every day, and it's going to alter the relationships that you have with other people. You can't value your spouse more than me. You can't value your family more than me. It's a challenge that God gave to those people, and he gives it to you too. This is the cost of following Jesus, and you have to decide, is this worth it? In verse 27, he says, anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. I don't like that. I don't want to carry a cross. I read that in the Bible about how Jesus carried the cross. They put it on his shoulder and he had to carry it. Really, it was more like he was dragging it behind him as he walked. I don't want to do that. I don't want to suffer. And Jesus makes it individual here. Anyone who does not carry his cross. He's not just talking to men, he's being specific. Everybody is going to have a different cross that they are going to have to carry. Everybody is going to be tempted by different sins in this room. And sure, some of you will be tempted by the same sins that everyone is tempted by. You'll be tempted by lust, you'll be tempted by hatred, you'll be tempted by jealousy. But for some of you, you're going to feel a temptation for a specific sin more strongly than other people are going to. And when you give into that sin, it's going to feel good. It's not even going to feel bad. You're not even going to feel guilty about it. You're going to think, this is what I want to be doing. This is what God's just made me different from other people. So it's fine for me to think about women this way. It's fine for me to think about my family this way. It's fine for me to talk about my boss this way or the government this way because I'm just different from other people. Each of you is going to be tempted by a sin, and you're going to feel it more strongly than other people in this room. And God says to you, do not give in. That is your cross. Well, that's one of them. That's one of your crosses. Then there's your physical health. There's the way that you look. There's the amount of intelligence you have, the amount of gifts that God has given you or that he hasn't given you. Some people are sick for 20 years and then they pass away. Other people are healthy. Why would he have that and I don't have that? Why can't I have health like that other person? Well, God says that's your cross. And I want you to carry it, and I don't want you to complain. And that's hard to do. And then Jesus talks about a tower. Let's say somebody wants to build a tower. Are you going to build a tower? No, we're not going to build a tower. Who builds a tower? Nobody builds a tower anymore. You might do a renovation in your home. You might replace the bathroom. You might put in a new faucet. You might even try putting in hardwood floors if you're really aggressive, if you're better at working on your homes than I am. You understand how embarrassing it is when somebody comes to your house and there are certain rooms that you can't let them into because this room is under construction. I'm working on my kitchen. Don't look under those cabinets. I think that's black mold. I'm not sure. Just don't look under there. Some of you might need caution tape over whole sections of your house. Yeah, I know I need to replace the roof. Yeah, I know it's leaking in this one room, and I've put a bucket under it, and it catches the water. I think that's good enough for now. Home renovations are expensive. And you know that guy in your neighborhood who thought he could fix his fence by himself, and he really can't. You say about that guy, just pay somebody to do it. Maybe he ran out of money. I guess he didn't consider the cost. And that sort of thing is embarrassing. Jesus says, if you're going to build something, and I've laid the foundation for you. The foundation is Jesus, forgiveness of sins, his blood shed for you. There's the foundation. You're going to build on it. What are you going to build? And have you considered what it's going to cost? There are a few things sadder than seeing young people leave the church. Seeing this tower that they started to build, and they built it on the right foundation. It was built on Jesus, and they started building, and they said, you know what? I'm done. This costs too much. This is affecting my relationships with other people, and so I'm going to give up on it. I'm not interested in doing this anymore. I can't give up my sleep on Sunday morning. I can't give up my time during the week to read the Bible or read a devotion or read a meditation. I don't have time to pray in the evening. I don't have time for any of that. And they leave their tower there, and it's still standing there, right in the yard where they started to build it, and everyone can see it. And they remember. I remember that young man, that old man, that middle-aged woman who started building that tower. I remember how they used to come here and worship. I remember how they were a part of our community, and they gave up and left it. And in Jesus' story, he says, if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and wasn't able to finish. If you know that guy in your neighborhood who hasn't finished his project in 5 years, that car that he's working on, it's kind of a joke. Jesus says it's the same way if you start to build this tower and you give up on it. Or you could think about it like a war. Suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. You got to think, is this battle worth it? I've got 10,000 men, he's got 20,000 men. That is not a good ratio. I have never been in a war before. But I would guess if your enemy has twice as many troops as you do, you might just say, I don't want to die today. Let's come up with some kind of a treaty. Let's have an armistice. Let's have a ceasefire. Let's come up with some reason not to fight. I will pay you some money. Just please don't kill me, because I know otherwise you're going to. What if the king that you're going to war against isn't just any king, but it's God? And compared to God, you're outmanned. He's more powerful than you. You can't fight against God. And you consider, if I keep on going down this path, coming into conflict with God, fighting against him, things are not going to work out for me. What can I do? Can I come up with some kind of a special strategy where I can sneak around behind him? Can I bring in some advanced technology? Maybe I can bring in a drone strike. Maybe I can bring in a plane or a bomb or something. Ultimately, you have to conclude, when you're coming into conflict with God, you can't win. The only thing you can do is give up. And the terms of surrender are not generous. He wants you to give up everything. Your money, your troops, your land, anything that might get in the way of you and him. That's what Jesus said to those people. That's the cost of following me. Have you thought about it? Have you considered it? Jesus had considered it. Jesus had thought about the cost of what he was doing. Even as he was telling his followers to continue following God, to understand the cost of being a disciple and to be a disciple, Jesus was following what his Father told him to do. And the cost was that he was going to suffer every single day of his life. He was going to give up being in heaven, which, as I understand, is a pretty good place to be. And Jesus was going to come to earth, be born as a human being. The distance from God to a human being is so incredible, but Jesus was willing to do that. And he got hungry, he got thirsty, and he got lonely. He was sad at different times. He had big crowds following him, but they followed him for mostly the wrong reasons. Jesus suffered. He was opposed by his own people, his own family, his own disciples. And then at the end of that, he wasn't crowned in glory. At the end of it, he died. That was the cost for Jesus. And he understood that. And he said it was worth it for him to live and to suffer and die, following every single one of his Father's commands so that your sins could be forgiven. The kind of obedience that Jesus talks about here does not describe any of us. It doesn't describe me. It doesn't describe elders in the church. This is a challenge that God gives us, but it's not one that any of us have lived up to. So we need forgiveness. We needed Jesus' obedience. We needed him to understand the cost and to go through with it anyway, suffering and dying on the cross to forgive all of your sins. And Jesus rose from the dead, and he said, I live, and you will live. Heaven is open before you. And now all Jesus wants to do is continue following him. About 7 or 8 months, I'm bad at counting the months, after Thanksgiving 2006 was a big day for Uncle Bill. Uncle Bill was waiting in lines once again. It was time for something very exciting, a landmark in American history. Uncle Bill was not waiting for a TV. He was not waiting for a new car. He was not looking for a new computer. Uncle Bill, on July 29th, 2007, was waiting in line so that he could be one of the very first people to purchase the first iPhone. It was only $600 for the expensive version. What a bargain nowadays. Uncle Bill was waiting in line, and there were 2 teenagers just ahead of him, actually. Uncle Bill was number 7 in line. They were 4 and 5. And he said to them, are you trying to be the cool kids in your school? Is that why you've been camped out here for 24 hours? And they said, no. No, we don't want to be the cool kids in our school. He said, well then why are you waiting here in this line? What are you going to do with the phones? You're just that big of Apple fans? Is that what you're waiting for? And they said, no, we're going to buy the phones, and we're going to sell them to people in the back of the line. And he said, I want this phone. I've waited in line for this phone, but I don't think that's going to work. And they said, no, it is. And they each bought 2 phones, and they went to the back of the line, and they sold them for $1,000 each. Those people didn't get in line early enough, but they decided that they had to have the iPhone, and so they were willing to pay $400 markup on the phone just to have it. To them, that was the cost, and it was worth it. And I suppose if you really wanted the iPhone, then you would have had to give up your time and your money on that first day back in 2007 to have it. Jesus lays out a different scenario. He's not talking to unbelievers here. He's talking to believers, people who have been following him, people who have heard his teaching, people who understand it. And he says, I want you to stop, and I want you to think about this. Do you really understand what you've been hearing all those years? Do you understand what I want you to do? The cost for being a disciple is very high. It is worth it. Keep on following me. Amen.